My name is Ian Grimm. I'm a senior at University of Texas at Austin.
I'm Chris
But
Gomez. I'm a freshman, but going to be a sophomore at the University of Texas at Austin.
I'm Atul Tony. I'm also a freshman at UT.
Mr. Graham, what is your position at NASA?
My name's Lee Graham. I'm currently a planetary research scientist, but I've had, as I mentioned to you, 17 or 18 different jobs in my 35-year career at NASA.
Can you give a brief overview of the objective of the Altair landing project?
So the Altair lunar lander was created with the idea that NASA was going to try and do a different way of doing business rather than the big, huge bureaucratic government program with all these data deliverables and a huge team and a huge cost and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of development time. So NASA decided to experiment and try a skunkworks approach, which is copyrighted by Lockheed, I might add, but pick, I think there were 22 of us discipline experts and move really fast and come up with a design that could fit in the schedule and budget we had. I was on the senior management team. I was the system engineering and integration manager. So my job was to, with a small team, develop the requirements, develop what were our goals, develop the processes for how we would work on the design and iteratively and come up with improvements. And so what we call closed architecture. So the final architecture fit within the limits of our mass and power and fit inside the fairing size even of the launch rockets and so on.
It must have been difficult integrating so many smaller systems into one larger project. So how did you effectively communicate between the different design teams?
Well, so again, skunkworks is kind of unique, and especially at NASA, we were unique. We actually co-located everybody. So based on what Lockheed had done with their skunkworks, we brought everybody here to the Johnson Space Center for about 3 months and just got to know each other because most of us had never worked together before. We were all discipline experts in our respective areas. And then we got to know each other, set up the parameters, set up and actually went through the first design cycle to see, what did we come up with? What did it look like? And then we distributed it. We let the teams go back to their home centers, which were literally all over the country. Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama, Kennedy in Florida, Jet Propulsion Lab in California, Ames in California. We literally had every single one of the 10 NASA centers involved in our project. So the biggest thing was communication. One of the disciplines inside systems engineering is called configuration management. So it was important that everyone was working on the same design. And as we discovered very quickly, if one team changed something slightly, it 99 times out of 100 rippled through the design, and so some other team, at least one other team, was affected. So what we saw was, for example, if the propulsion team wanted to add an additional 2% just for uncertainties in the orbit, that increased the mass of and volume of the tanks. So that affected the structures folks, which affected the loads folks. So they had to strengthen some of the attach points and added mass to the vehicle. And so there was virtually nothing we could change that didn't affect somebody else. So that was one of the things we worried about and communicated with everyone. The other one was we designed the vehicle off of what was called design analysis cycles. So we would define, this is the parameters that everyone's going to start with. This is our goal to get to. This is the time frame. This is the resources, the money and time you have to do it. Let's go.
So do you think the more updated space infrastructure that NASA has would make the project more feasible now?
Well, yes and no, typical aerospace answer. No, in that the physics haven't changed. We were working with what are called hypergolics. So propellants that when they combine automatically burst into ignition. They're storable for long periods of time at reasonable temperatures. But we also we're using liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen. Those are the most efficient, what we call highest specific impulse, but most efficient propellants, chemical propellants that we know of today. And so the physics haven't changed on that in like 50 years. So there's not going to be a whole lot of improvement on what we came up with. Electronics are a little bit lighter, but what we discovered in the design was electronics were like 2% of the mass. So it's not going to make a huge difference, with the microelectronics that we have today versus 10 years ago.
So were you satisfied with the final project, like the result?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I was very happy with the team. Like I said earlier, most of us had never worked together, so everybody came in with a desire to succeed, and it showed. And so everybody put in the extra amount of effort. No, in that I think we could have done another iteration with some out of the box ideas and potentially got the architecture to close. So one of the problems we were dealing with was the vehicle was a little bit heavy for the launch vehicle that we were talking with, that we had. And it wasn't as reliable. It didn't have the redundancy that we typically expect for a human crewed vehicle. And so, so we were working on adding additional backups and redundancies. The main issue I had was on the fourth design cycle, we had designed it, we had put in the requirements to match the Apollo lunar lander. And so it came close to closing. If we would have tweaked it a couple places, I think it would have closed. But we were already talking about the fifth design cycle to add additional redundancy, which adds mass and complexity. So we were starting to move in the wrong direction away from our goal. So that was a little frustrating.
So you said like everyone in the project was from different areas and all around. How do you think the different diversity to the group impacted the project?
It was men and women, it was young and old. We had several astronauts. With the diversity, it actually made us stronger because everybody would come at it from a different viewpoint. We had folks from JPL that had experience in unmanned vehicles. We had folks like me that had worked on space shuttle and space stations. So I had a lot of crewed experience. We had crew that had actually flown. Diversity, without a doubt, in my mind, made us stronger. We had people that had just come out of college. We had people that had 30 years experience. So it was a really nice mix, and it was a great learning environment. Everybody had a desire to succeed. So everybody would put in the extra time and spend the time explaining their design. So everybody learned from it. It was a great experience.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
You're welcome. Good luck on your school career. I think you've chosen a great university, so I think you got off to a great start so